Hi, I'm Beck and I am here to talk about series, specifically series that I completed in 2024, so last year, series that I ended up deciding not to continue, so I kind of freed up my reading space, and then series that are currently ongoing. So hopefully I haven't missed any. I don't think I have, that are glaringly obvious anyway. So without further ado, I might dive into my achievements first, which are the series that I finished last year. The first one would be Wolf Song, so Brother Song was the fourth book. This came out in July. The other books, Heart Song, also came out in 2024. So this is a fairly recently finished series, and it's one that I picked up and then kept up with, which I'm very happy with. It's a male werewolf story with werewolf politics in this small town. It's got found family. It was a fantastic series. I gave all of them 5 stars, and that is why I very much stuck to it and continued reading it and then completed it, because I loved it. This was my favorite book of last year as well. Another series that I stuck to and finished, I listened to all the audiobooks, and that was The House Witch, and this one is a cozy fantasy. It starts out about this guy named Finn, and he is a cook or a chef, and he becomes the chef at this castle for the king and the queen, and then all the people who live in the castle. But he's got this magic called house magic, and witches are not revered in this world. So he's trying to hide the fact that he's a witch, but he's bringing almost this found family safe dynamic to his kitchen and to the castle. And the more people that buy into this safe environment, the more powerful his magic is. So I liked the first book. I didn't love the second one as much, and then the third one was disappointing, but I decided to finish the series anyway. So that is a trilogy that I've completed. However, I think it continues and branches out into other books after this, and I've decided not to continue those. So at least I did the trilogy, and then I've decided not to do the rest. At the end of last year, I also squeezed in a romance book series, and I had a lot of fun with it. And it starts out with Witches Get Stuff Done, and this follows, now I can't remember the main character's name, but this follows our protagonist. She is on a boat going to this island, and she's going to this island because she wants to reconnect with her mother and her mother's past. Her mother has passed away over the past couple of months, and so now she's like, I want to reconnect to the family history. So that's where she's going, because I think there's like an aunt or something that lives there that is saying, yeah, you can come and stay in my house and get to know the past. And so that's what she's doing. However, on the way there, she's getting really sick, and it turns out that she's got some form of magic, and it's being rekindled on her foray into going back to this island where her mum was raised and where she grew up. And it's also a romance, a small town romance, found family dynamic again, when she forms almost this coven. She makes friends with these women, and then also the guy who's the lead love interest is a librarian as well. So it builds quite a humorous foundation, but it's got some seriousness to it as well. And I just like that these were fun. They were funny and ridiculous, and they were really easy to read. All 3 of them I really enjoyed, and I gave all of them 4 stars. So I'm happy that I stuck with them, finished them, and just had a great time, because they weren't that long either. So it was a great way to finish off my year. I could not do a series video without including this massive achievement, because it took me 3 weeks to read book 5 of the Stormlight Archive, Wind and Truth, and I reread all the others before it as well. So these are over 1,000 pages each book, and I managed to not only reread all of them, but finish this before the year finished as well. So that is a massive achievement. I have a spoiler review for this book if you want to go and check that out. But to keep things spoiler free here, I overall liked this book. It didn't feel like it lived up to the others in the series for me. It wasn't my favorite, but again, I gave it 4 stars still. There were a lot of things about this that I enjoyed. And again, I am pretty much relieved to have finished this. Like, this is huge. And then the last series that I'm considering I finished in 2024, I read The Atlas Complex, which is the 3rd book in Olivia Blake's Dark Academia series, and I read and finished that one. I've also got a spoiler review of that one. It starts out spoiler free, goes into spoilers, and I was very disappointed by this. I gave it, I think, a 2 stars from memory, and after rereading the first 2 books, I was just massively frustrated that this one did not turn out very good. So after that, I decided that I'm not only going to not continue anything else by that author in that series. If anything else comes out, I'm just going to ignore the author altogether. I don't think she really works for me, which is a real shame, but it also leads really nicely into the series that I've also decided to pull the plug on. I don't think I've mentioned this series for probably a solid 1.5 years, and that is Black Sun and Fevered Star, which is a fantasy series that I loved the first book with. It just grabbed you and dragged you in from the first 10 pages. But then Fevered Star was a real deviation, at least I felt, because if you're going to bring characters together in the first book and then scatter them in the second, at least make it worthwhile. And it didn't feel worthwhile to me, and it feels like there's still potentially going to be separations between them for the third book. And I thought there's no point building up your characters and a cool dynamic between them if you're going to keep them separated for the rest of the series. Whether they come together or not in the third book, I don't really care about, because I've decided that I'm not going to read it anyway. Because after reading Fevered Star, giving it a 3 stars, and then reflecting and going, I was very disappointed in that. I might have given it a 2 instead. So that is a low rating. If it was maybe a 3.5, I probably would have continued grudgingly. And I thought, I want to enjoy what I'm reading. So I'm not going to continue, I think, with Mirrored Heavens. I think that came out 2023, 24, August sometime, I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm not doing it. A recent did not finish in terms of series for me, so one that I've recently decided that I'm not going to continue anymore is Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear. So this is The Wayward Children book 10, and I read it in January, so you can check it out in my January wrap up if you want to hear more about the actual book. But this one is a novella installment in the series, and often they follow different characters that have some crossover with the earlier books, and they can be read almost as standalones, but they have overall connections to the rest of the series. And I felt like this one had a lot less whimsy. So I liked the world building. In these books, they have portal fantasies. So kids go through doorways. They're asked if they're sure, and then they cross over into this doorway and it becomes their own catered magical world. So something that really suits them. And then often they are brought back into the real world and they struggle to re-assimilate after all of their experiences. But I don't feel like this series is pulling it off for me anymore. And I gave, I think, 3 stars to the most recent book. It was okay, but I don't see myself getting excited about it, and I don't get excited about the next book in the series. Every January one usually comes out and I just don't care anymore. I didn't care last year and I thought, no, I'll give it one more try, and I gave it one more try and I still don't care. So that one has now stopped for me too. I felt quite similarly in the do not care basket about Lore Olympus. Now this is volume 6 and I felt do not care about volume 5. So I did try volume 6 and I ended up liking it. It felt more consistent than volume 5, and it went in a direction that I could respect after all of the character development in the first several volumes. So this one really brought it back for me, but it also concluded in a way that felt not complete but satisfying, and that made me think I don't need to read anymore, I'm done. And also these are very expensive to buy, so maybe in a couple of years time I'll eventually come back to this. I know it's also a webtoon online, so I can go and read it there if I want to. I don't really like reading on screens, so I might avoid doing that, and if I decide to continue it, I'll get the physical book of the next volume. I think they're still coming out quite consistently, so it's not the end of the series by any means. It's not even like halfway through, I think, but it felt like enough for me to end it here, and I don't feel any kind of forlorn about stopping. So that tells me that I've made the right choice. Now I've just got this DNF and then one more after it. So this one is a fairly recent one, and I talked about it in my currently reading video, which I post every week. And in that video, I just made a snap decision and I put down The Song Rising and consequently The Mask Falling, which I hadn't started rereading. I read over 100 pages of this and I was not connecting to it in the sense of emotional investment. And despite liking this series before, because this is a re-released version, I was liking it, but I just wasn't enjoying it as much as I thought I would be. And I realized I was going to only give this a 2 stars. In the past, I think I'd given it a 3 or a 3.5. And after making that realization, I then couldn't unlearn that fact about my brain. So I thought, no, I'm not going to continue this. Therefore, I'm also taking this off my to be read pile. So I have DNF'd the Bone Season series. And it just feels like something about Samantha Shannon's writing doesn't work for me, and I want it to work, but it's just not working. I think I gave Priority of the Orange Tree probably a 3 stars, and even still, when I reflect on that book, I feel bored by it. And then A Day of Fallen Night I tried 60 pages of, and I also could not connect to the writing style. So it might just be the personal style and tone of these that is just not for me, which is a shame, because a female fantasy author I thought I would love. It's just not working for me, and that's always going to be sad. And then lastly, on the did not finishes section, before I get into series that I've currently got ongoing, which is exciting, this last DNF is Bookshops and Bone Dust. So I read Legends and Lattes, I read Bookshops and Bone Dust. I was more than happy for the story to conclude at Legends and Lattes, and this is kind of a prequel to that story where Viv, the main character, is 18 here, but she's an adult in the other book. And so it was enjoyable, not my favorite. Legends and Lattes was definitely up there as being one of my favorite cozy fantasies, and I feel like it kickstarted the whole cozy fantasy genre as we have come to know and love it. But this one has another book coming out, and it follows the bookstore owner, and I think it comes out in 2025, like at the end of the year. And I'll put a cover on if there is a cover available, but I'm just not interested in reading more adjacent stories about these characters. I want something new by this author, and if that's in a cozy fantasy space, then fantastic, but I'm not interested anymore in the characters that we've already met. I just don't care. So I prefer something else. And that's why I've decided to DNF this series, because even though it's probably going to be enjoyable, I'm just not interested anymore. Okay, so now we are going into the ongoing series that I have on my to be read pile. This includes books that are potentially coming out this year if they've not already been released. So first of all, I'm going to say The Will of the Many, because I'm highly anticipating The Strength of the Few, which is the sequel to this, I think coming out in September now. Initially it was coming out in May. The fact that it got pushed to September breaks my heart, because this is one of my new favorite fantasy series of all time. And I have a spoiler-free review of it if you want to know what all of the hype is about, because I would highly recommend reading this if you are somewhat into fantasy. It is so worth your time. And then this was a book that came out in January, so that's why I talked about new releases in series that I was currently reading, and that is Onyx Storm, which is part of an ongoing series. I don't think we're going to get the next book for more than 2 years now, because Rebecca Yarros wanted a bit of a break, but this is the third book out of 5 books in the Emperor series, and it follows Violet Sorrengail, who is forced into becoming a dragon rider instead of going down the path of joining the scribe quadrant like she thought she was. Her mother is the general of this war college called Basgaiath, and she's like, well, no, you're going to be forced down this path instead. You've got to walk across this parapet, almost die, try and survive, and hopefully bond a dragon to then ride it. It's the midst of a war as well, and it's just such a fascinating, fast-paced series. It's got romance as well. It's called a romantasy series for a reason, because there is that pivotal love interest, and I just really enjoyed this series. It was so hyped, and I agree with the hype. It was so much fun. I just pulled a book off my to be read cart, and that is A Pirate's Life for Tea, which is another cozy fantasy that I've got on my to be read pile, and this one came out last year, and there's another one coming out very shortly in a few months, and I thought if I like this one, I'll obviously continue. But I liked the first book enough that I don't necessarily need to continue, but I just thought, well, why not? I'll try it anyway. It could backfire. I hope it doesn't, but we'll see what happens. And then of course we've got 2 graphic novel series, and I don't think there's a release date for this yet, but I'm reading Heartstopper. This is volume 5. I don't know when volume 6 is coming out, and I was tempted to leave it off this video, but as a friend pointed out, and rightly so, it is part of my ongoing series, even if it might not immediately have a release coming up. So I just wanted to mention it so it was noted as part of the series I'm keeping my eye on, because I love Heartstopper. It's such a wholesome romance. The other graphic novel series is Fence, and this is volume 6. I don't know when volume 7 is coming out. There's no release date yet, but I'm anticipating the second half of 2025. So I'm hoping to be able to continue this, because I love these characters. Again, it's a male-male romance. It's also like a sporting story, because, you know, it follows the fencing team, and I just really enjoy it. It's so much fun, and I just want more of it. And the fact that it doesn't have a release date for volume 7 yet, it hurts me. Now, this series that I'm going to talk about next, it gives me the ultimate shame, because I have been on this book, like I have read up to this point in the series, and I have not continued for like 3 years now. Even though I've had the genuine intention to continue, I've tried to restart this series twice. I don't know what it is. It hasn't worked for me in terms of starting it again and just getting up that momentum again. And that is the Dresden Files. This is Skin Game, book 15. I have read this one, so I'm up to Peace Talks, which is 16. And I have the audiobooks for the whole series. So I don't have any excuse not to continue. I'm thinking that I will do a continuation of my reread in the second half of 2025, but that's just like food for thought. That is what my general plans are, and I hope they stick to what I want, because I keep saying, and I've included it in a few goals videos, that I need to continue this. And that hasn't motivated me. It hasn't worked. And usually that would motivate me. So I don't know how else to push myself, because it's a series that I've genuinely got a lot of enjoyment for. But for some reason, maybe because it's so long, I've just not bothered to continue with it, which is ridiculous. It is a sham, and it's time I continued it finally. If you haven't heard about Dresden, because you might be living under a rock, it's about a wizard detective named Dresden, Harry Dresden. In Chicago, he solves supernatural murders, and there's often a few plots going on at the same time, and the audiobooks are narrated by James Masters, and they are fantastic. So that is why I plan to read the audios. This next one is a fairly recent addition to my to be read pile, and it's called Kings and Queens, which is a male-male dinosaur shifter romance. Already it sounds chaotic and ridiculous, I know, but I read them not to take them seriously. I read them for a bit of enjoyment and a fun time. And I read Smash and Grab at the end of 2024, and I really enjoyed myself. And then I continued with the second book, and then this is the third book. I think there's a fourth one as well. All of them seem to be released already, so it's a series that has already been completed, which is a good thing. These audiobooks are usually only 6 to 8 hours long as well. So if I want to read them in between something else and just like get a book done, they are perfect for sandwiching in between other things. So that is why it's remained on my TBR as well. Not only is it fun, it's also fast to read. So that is a bonus. And I'm anticipating that I won't carry this series over into 2026 or beyond, because they're so fast to read. So at some point this year, I will get to them. Now, I've only got 2 more books left. So one of them is Rick Riordan, and he's releasing new books in the Percy Jackson universe. And I think the third book is coming out in September this year. So that is his book series following Percy, who's trying to get into college, and he needs letters of recommendation from the gods in order to do that. So he's got to go on these mini quests in order to achieve those letters of recommendation. And it's just so chaotic, but it's so much fun, and it somehow brings old readers back into the fold and then brings new readers up to speed. And it's just such a perfect balance, and it has that maintained humor as well from the Percy Jackson series that we know and love. So I'm really enjoying these. The fact that I loved Rick Riordan when I was reading his books at 11 or 12 years old, and I still love them as a 30-year-old or 31-year-old, is just incredible. I just love that he's an author that I've kept with consistently, and I've read like 30 books or something ridiculous that he's published. So consistency is key. He's doing great. And then the last book that I wanted to talk about was The Spell Shop, because I love this. It was one of my favorites of last year. And after reading this cozy fantasy, I thought, it's done. It's finished. It's a contained story. This is fantastic. However, The Enchanted Library is coming out this year. I'm not sure when. And I think it's got a cover that's like purple, and it follows the prequel story to this one, because in this series there is a sentient houseplant named Kaz, and he is like the sidekick to our main character. And the first book is, I think, all about him gaining sentience and what his old master did in, I think, using forbidden magic to create him. Beyond that, I don't know anything else, but I liked this enough that I think I could read a prequel and it not ruin this for me. So I'm looking forward to giving that one a try. So that is what I'm considering an ongoing series, even though it's technically a prequel. I honestly thought that I would have a lot more book series ongoing than I actually do, and maybe I do and I'm just forgetting them, like genuinely forgetting them. But I did crawl through my Goodreads challenges over the past 3 years to see if anything had possibly been missed, and I don't think it has. So that is all of the series that I have recently finished, decided to not continue anymore, and that I've got ongoing. But if any of these are on your to be read pile, please let me know. I'd be very interested. But thank you so much for watching this far into the video. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed. I'll talk to you below in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.